Hey everyone, my name is Mike Vaughn, and welcome to GVN Interviews. And I have to say, I am feeling very lucky because we got Lucky McKee here talking about the Blu-ray release of his latest film, Old Man. First of all, again, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Right on, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
absolutely. So again, I won't fanboy out too much, but I am a huge fan.
Oh, please, by all means.
Um, and gosh, I had to say that what a great film. I've always been a big fan, but like this is just kind of like reconfirmed why I find your movie so interesting and exciting because uh you never really know what to expect, and I love how Old Man kind of always keeps you slightly just off kilter like the entire time.
Oh, thanks, man. That's really nice to hear. It was
Yeah.
it was a really fun one to make. We shot this one right at the kind of right in the center of the pandemic. It was January, February of 2021, and it was right before the vaccine came out, and it was intense, man. Just to leave your house, and get on an airplane, at that time was still really scary. I mean, it's all still really scary to me. I don't consider it completely over.
Yeah.
Um, but all of the safety protocols and us having to work in a bubble and all that, thankfully this was the kind of movie that was kind of perfect for that scenario. And I think that ultimately we got better deals on things and nobody was making anything at the time, so we got to shoot the movie on this awesome soundstage in upstate New York. And people were just fired up to be able to like make something with other people because so many of us had been cooped up, and then we're making a movie about two guys that are in a cabin the entire time, which is kind of funny, but it was kind of reflecting, I think, kind of a lot of our mental states at that time. I think that invariably found its way into the film.
Hmm. That's really interesting because I was one of my questions was this just like a product of like the height of COVID, or was just kind of coincidence? I guess,
It was a coincidence. It was a script that Mark Center, a friend of Mark Center's, had written as a play, and he had just recently turned it. At that time, had just turned it into a screenplay. And I was kind of floating around the project for about maybe a year and a half, maybe even 2 years. And then the pandemic hit, and nobody could do anything. Nobody could make anything, and it was a really scary time. And we started looking at Old Man again, and we're going, maybe now's the perfect time to make that movie because it doesn't require a huge crew. It's not logistically complicated. It's hunkered down in one location, and it just. I wonder if the movie would have gotten made if it hadn't been for the pandemic, actually. So there was a lot of contributing factors to that. It was the perfect movie to make, at that budget level and at that time, So I'm
yeah.
really glad, and I'm really glad we did. I almost moved on from it several times, and then when it became apparent that it was something that was ready to go, that was the perfect thing to make, we jumped in, and then I just had a blast, man. It's like one of the cleanest creative experiences I've ever had. The writer was a joy to work with, developing the script and getting it into a more cinematic space and away from the theatrical space a little bit, and then getting to do a feature, direct Mark in a feature, and then Stephen Lang walks through the door, and he was just an absolute joy to work with. He plays hard asses in a lot of the stuff he's in, right? But
Yeah.
couldn't be further from that as a real guy.
Nice. That's awesome.
He still really
Um,
really loves what he does.
yeah, that's great. Like, so it's funny because when I was like taking notes for my initial review, I was really thinking, man, this is so cool because it really harkens back to those like single location or like limited location movies. Like I automatically think of like
Yeah.
Hitchcock's Rope. I think of like 12 Angry Men,
Hmm.
like stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I wonder because you do it beautifully, but like, is there an extra layer of
Yep.
challenge to kind of make
Almost there.
or kind of have that limited sort of space to like create tension?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully we were able to build the cabin. We were able to build that on a soundstage as opposed to like going to a location, shooting it on location. So we actually got to design the cabin from the ground up. We got to kind of base the look of it on the work of a painter I really like a lot, Andrew Wyeth. And we got to pack it with as much meaning as possible because again we get to build it from scratch, right? So it's like my production designer and I, once we got the skin on the walls, so to speak, and stuff, and got the windows in and everything, we would just go in there and sit and just like look at a wall and say, what can we do here to give this thing meaning or texture or and we did that with every inch of that place and just packed it with as much texture and detail and meaning as we could, because we knew that we were going to be in this space for 90 minutes, over the course of making it, this was the first movie I've ever made where I didn't go in with any kind of shot list or storyboards or anything. My DP and I were about to sit down to start that process when I got there for prep, and we quickly realized that this isn't the kind of movie that you can storyboard. I mean, you could, but we had two great actors that had a lot of theater experience, and they really knew how to like work a set and stuff. So we rolled the dice, and we just decided, okay, we're gonna have really long rehearsals in the mornings, and we're going to let the actors move around the space, and always keep in mind that we want to constantly be moving around and using as much of the space as possible. I mean, the production designer was stoked because we got to see every inch of what she built, you know? Um, so we would do that. We'd get in there and we'd rehearse every day. We'd shoot anywhere between 8 to 12 pages of just these long dialogue scenes with these guys. And they were able to do long, uninterrupted takes like that. So we'd get it on its feet and they'd move around, and I'd come in with some ideas, and then they'd contribute some ideas, and we'd figure it out together. And then my DP and I would just be constantly pushing ourselves to kind of change it up visually and make sure that we were keeping it fresh and interesting. So it was a it took me out of my comfort zone in a really cool way. And I picked up a lot of cool tools that have helped me on the stuff I've made sense,
Nice.
without having such a rigid plan when I went in. It gave us that room for discovery, and made it a lot more collaborative and therefore fun.
You can definitely tell, like I think I even noted in my review that I'm sure that like I know you said Mark had a lot of theater training. I know at least, I mean, I know Steven for sure had like has been on Broadway. Um so I'm sure like
Oh, big time. Yeah, his whole life, I mean, the guy was on Broadway with like, a bunch of titans, over the years. Um, and got to work with, Death of a Salesman and all of that. He's done tons of great theater over the years. So it just, those are the kind of actors you needed for that kind of thing.
doing the long takes, doing like something like, rehearsing to that end, was there any like room to sort of maybe like play with the dialogue, or was everything just sort of like, stuck to script?
Sure. I mean, we worked, Joel and I worked really hard on the script about a month before we started prep on the movie, and again, tried to bring it into a more cinematic space. I mean, like the third act of the thing, for instance, was very, very heavily dialogue based, and I told Joel, I don't want the characters just to tell the audience everything that's transpiring or that has been transpiring. I'd like to show it, the kind of classic rule. So really, really redesigned the third act and brought it into a more kind of like visual cinematic space. That's where the heavy flashback elements and those dreamy sort of elements that come out, at the end, kind of came from. And then when we were rehearsing in the mornings, absolutely. I mean, like we were following the script very closely, but I try not to close myself off to a better idea, so it's like if Slang had a cooler way to say a certain thing, or if he wanted to kind of pepper in some detail or texture or just humor, he brought humor in with a lot of lines here and there. And it was, but the writer was there during the process, so it was all, everybody was cool with it. I think you can you can close yourself off to good ideas if you're just following this rigid plan too closely, you know. So we kept ourselves really open, and yeah, there was definitely some improvisational moments and stuff, but we would figure out what those were before we started rolling the camera.
Nice.
It wasn't like we just started rolling the camera and just, you know, say whatever you want, because that can get completely out of control. I mean, even somebody like John Cassavetes, who everybody thinks his movies are largely improv and stuff like that. That improv process takes place when the camera's off.
Yeah.
You know, it's a figuring out process when they're actually there on the day, or even in a long rehearsal period or something like that. You try to make as many of those discoveries as possible when you don't have 30, 40, 50, 60 people on the clock, because you got to make your days. You know, we only had 15 days to shoot this movie.
Wow.
You know, so that's a lot. That's a lot of material to get through in 15 days.
Gosh, the acting in this is just superb. Like Mark and Steven just play off each other so incredibly well. Like I feel like it's funny because I feel like the two of them have been working together for years and years, and
Yeah.
just to see that kind of chemistry, you know, I feel like the movie really does kind of hinge on that relationship.
It's everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, a big thing, you know, obviously Slang has like the lion's share of the dialogue. He has you know, he's just got so many words to get out. He called it word salad. You know, he's got so much word salad to work his way through. But Mark was really interesting in getting him ready for his part, because one of the primary functions of his performance is reacting to this crazy old man and all the things he's doing, and how to like bring as much as possible to that, you know. So I had him look at a lot of films. Rope was a good example. I had him look at a lot of Jimmy Stewart's performances, because Jimmy Stewart was a really great reactor. Like, the way he'd stay engaged in a scene, it's not like everything just turns on when you have your lines to say. It's like, it's the stuff that's happening when you're not saying your lines that can be just as important. And we tried to, you know, if you go back through the film, especially knowing how it all kind of turns out or whatever, you start to see little hints just in the way Mark is reacting to things, and the type of behavior he's exhibiting. You start to realize that, you know, the realizations at the end of the movie are very well supported by what he's doing throughout the film, you know.
And what I thought was really awesome is, of course, the opening credits has the artwork from your wonderful wife, Vanessa.
Yeah.
And really incredible. Actually, what was really cool is I thought, I think I heard that she has artwork in the new Knives Out film.
In Glass Onion, yeah, she did watercolor portraits of every cast member, and that's the end credits of the movie, when they have the picture of Daniel Craig with his little yellow scarf on and stuff. Those are her paintings. Ryan hired her to do those, which was just like such a thrill for her. And in Old Man, she not only did the opening credits in Old Man, that landscape, that if you look closely, when it's all the way in the wide shot at the beginning, you realize that the mountains in the background are actually the shape of the old man sleeping in profile. And there's a lot of little clues and things that are kind of built in there. So when people get their Blu-ray, they can kind of step through it and they can study that picture and see that there's all these little clues in there. But she also did the storybooks when the old man's telling the story about the Purple Lake, that storybook that he presents to Mark's character. All those illustrations are by Vanessa, and there's even some illustrations from my son kind of worked into the set too, who was 3 years old at the time. He's a really, really good artist himself, and you can see kind of one of his drawings is just graffitied on a wall, and then another one is actually a print of one of his red marker drawings. They're kind of planted in there, so you got to have the family represented. It helps when they're brilliant artists. Yeah, there's a bunch of little clues and Easter eggs, and you know, like the pillowcase that the old man has on his bed has been in all of my stuff since Sick Girl, my Masters of Horror episode. It's the same pillowcase they made for Angela's character in that. It's kind of popped up in all my movies. So
Nice.
all these little things.
Speaking of Masters of Horror, I feel like You, Argento, and Carpenter have my favorite
Oh,
episodes
really?
of that.
That's nice company to be in, man.
Yeah.
Those guys are big idols of mine. It was a trip to even get to work on that show, at
Yeah.
that age especially.
What was your favorite episode of that series?
In the first season, honestly, I really loved the Argento one. I loved Jennifer a lot. But I think my favorite in terms of just like I don't know, like the style and the feeling of it was the first one that Toby Hooper did, Dance of the Dead. There's something just there was something so like youthful and exuberant about that, and here's a guy that was, I think, probably in his late 60s at the time, making this thing, and it was just, I don't know, I love the energy of that. There's these really cool car rigs that he used in that, where they put a car on it's on soundstage, but they put the car on a balloon.
Hmm.
The car's like sitting on a balloon, so the car has like this floaty sort of movement, and they have this rear projection behind them, and he built these mobiles that were for like objects passing by, that this mobile would just swing in front of the camera lens,
Oh wow.
and it would create this feeling of trees going by, or it's just really neat. It was like total movie magic type stuff. So that one I learned a lot from that one, so I really liked it a lot. But yeah, that was. I wish that show was still on. It was so fun to work on.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's such a shame. I always thought that that series definitely had like way more potential. I mean, especially when you have sort of like a new crop of masters kind of coming up and
Yeah, but I think that stuff like, Guillermo del Toro's new show, Cabinet of
yeah.
Curiosities, is kind of filling that void. I thought that show was magnificent. I really
Oh
enjoyed
yeah.
that a lot. I really love short form horror like that. Because a lot of the great horror movies in the 30s uh, were kind of a similar length. A lot of them were under an hour long, because they ran so many double and triple bills back in those days, that those would be like the smaller movie on like a big bill. Like they'd have like the big expensive movie, and then they'd have like the genre movies kind of underneath the bill, and cartoons and newsreels and all that kind of stuff. You used to go to a show and get like a real show for you'd be there for like 4 hours. Um, so that horror works really well in that like 1 hour or less sort of space, I think.
I've been so slammed, but I've watched the first half of it, and I think so far, Cemetery Rats one is like far and away my favorite.
Oh man, how many of them have you watched?
I've watched the first four, so I still need to like
Oh,
round out
okay. Oh man, you have so many delights. The last couple are just ass kickers, man. The
nice.
the Panos Cosmatos one and the Jennifer Kent one are they're two of my favorite films of the year.
Nice.
Just those little 1 hour movies.
Yeah,
Great
I mean
show.
that would be kind of amazing if you could if they do. I'm sure they're probably going to do another season. If you could do one, that would be.
Yeah, man, I wish. From your lips, hopefully.
Hey,
Yeah,
listen,
that would be fun, man.
we're putting it out there, right?
Yeah. No, that's a good idea.
Um,
It's a good idea.
but
I'm
yeah.
just starting to get into television work. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, interesting. Like, I know I talked to a lot of filmmakers that kind of sort of cut their teeth in TV, but then sort of pivot to film, sort of the opposite. And so I know like some filmmakers like kind of like that sort of fast paced of a TV shoot. And then like some feel like kind of find that hindering. I was gonna say I feel like you probably like that maybe more fast paced aspect of it.
Sure, I'd always love to have more time, but I very rarely, I almost never get it. I mean, even, that's like, I did a TV episode of a show over the summer. And they were like, we have to shoot all this whole hour in 10 days. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, but it's impossible, like everybody keeps going overtime, and it's really hard to do, and this, and that. And I'm like, we'll be fine. And it's like, I'm just making indie films, it's like, you're just used to having to work at that pace. But on a big television show, you have a lot more support, you know? So we were able to move really good. We wrapped early most days, actually, and we got it all in the can, And everybody was like, "What's happening?" I was like, "This is luxurious as far as I'm concerned." I make these tiny little indie movies all the time. TV's a lot of fun. It's much more of a team sport
Oh,
than
nice.
like, me making a feature, but if you're working with the right people, it's really fun collaboration.
Now, do you find that like maybe more limited budget actually kind of forces everyone to get a little bit more creative? I've heard that a lot where you don't have.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of bullshit in that. I mean, you have to be, you do have to be very inventive, and you have to figure out how to make things play. And but with the low budget stuff, a lot of time you feel like it almost feels like you're trying to trick everybody into thinking what you're doing is bigger than it is. Um, but sure, I mean, but on a low budget movie, say you fall behind schedule and you're a half a day behind, you have to figure out how to make that day up. Sometimes you have to alter the material on the fly and rewrite the script on the day and say, okay, well, we can't have this toy that we wanted today, so and you always, when you find yourselves in those situations, which you always do, no matter how much you prepare, you try to use it to your creative advantage if you can. If an opportunity comes up where you can't film something the way you hoped you would be able to film it, you start to think, okay, if I take a different approach of this, how can I, not only pull it off, but also maybe answer a question that keeps coming up that I haven't answered yet, or just try to use it as a way to like make the movie better, not worse. you know, and some, like The Woman, for instance, there was some really great discoveries that came as a result of falling behind and being under the gun, and that actually made the movie better. Um, and then sometimes you just have to figure out how to just stop the hemorrhaging and make it work.
Just keep everything from not catching on fire.
Yeah, but I mean, even with bigger, but like this TV show I worked on this summer is a huge budget, and it was great. But you still have to think on your feet, and you still fall behind. And you're always working within your means, or trying to exceed your means at least a little bit. My cat
Yeah.
came in to join the party here. This is Margaret. This is
Oh.
Margaret.
Oh, she does not look
She's
happy.
I'm her least favorite person in the house.
Oh,
We have a 5-year-old, and that is her person, man. She
nice.
just adores him. So.
I'm kind of curious to sort of wrap up. Let's say budget was not an issue. What would be like you got a blank check? Like what would be your dream project? Like what would be like something you've always wanted to make?
I wrote it. I wrote it during the pandemic. It was something I had kind of been holding in my drawer. It was always intended to be my second film after if I ever got the chance to make May. And when I made May, I decided to put that second one in a drawer because I was really kind of traumatized by working in the business for the first time and this type of stuff I had to deal with. And I realized I didn't have enough clout or power, or I wasn't working with somebody that could protect me that had enough clout and power to kind of give me the safety I needed to make it, because it's very personal, like May is. But I have a friend that has kind of gained a lot of notoriety and weight in the business, and he asked me to dig it out about a year and a half ago, and I did, and reapproached it, and I'm really close to having it in the shape I want to have, and he's going to help me get it made. So I'm actually in that scenario.
Oh, nice.
It's not a big, it's not like a big epic movie. It's not a horror movie or anything like that. It's very much a movie about where I grew up. It's more like something like Sling Blade or Mud or One False Move, like one of those kind of movies. It's very much about the way I grew up. But it looks like I'm gonna, it looks like that might actually happen, which I'm really, really excited about, because if I'm able to make that, then anything else I get to do after that will just feel like a bonus. It really is the most important thing to me. So I'm hoping that starts to come together within the next year or two.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So is there any like projects that are in the works that you can talk about? Or I know you said you shot a TV show. I don't know if that was like maybe
I did. I haven't heard anybody announce who the directors are for the show yet, so I'm kind of
okay.
keeping my lip zipped on that. But but by the end of January, early February, you'll know, because it'll be on the air sometime in February.
That's awesome.
I'm really excited about it. It really took me out of my usual comfort zones, but it's a really interesting show. And the episode I got to do has a really cool blend of comedy, drama, and action, actually.
Hmm.
So it was a big challenge for me, and man, it was fun. It was really, really fun. I can't wait for people to see it. And I got to work with some incredible cast. So yeah, that's the next thing that's coming out. And then, like I said, that personal project I'm working on, and then I have another thing. I'm kind of in a holding pattern on those other two things I was talking about. So I'm working on another like big kind of sprawling opus thing that I don't know if it's going to end up being a TV show or a series of movies or what, but it's a big thing that might take up the next 5 years of my life, maybe even 10 years. I don't know. It's a big thing, but just I've I go through this thing where it's like I'm trying to figure out the next thing that I want to try to do, and the last several months, I've had a couple things I was working on and trying to make work, older things that had been created a while ago. And I just realized I was getting up in the morning and I was feeling like the things I was working on were like a burden, and that there was this other thing that I really wanted to work on, which happens a lot, It's because the older you get, the more precious you get about what you're going to spend your time on, So I kind of just within the last week had to let some people down on something I was working on that I just wasn't feeling, And now I'm back to work on this bigger thing that I've been wanting to do for a while, and I'm so fired up to get up and work on it every day,
Awesome.
So we'll see how it goes. But
Yeah, that's really exciting. And for everybody watching, Old Man is out on Blu-ray right now. Get it immediately.
yeah,
It's fantastic. It's like you said, it's one of those movies that every time you watch it, you notice a little bit more like details and foreshadowing.
hopefully, yeah.
So yeah, it's a must watch, and especially on repeat. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and the Blu-ray doesn't have a commentary track on it because somehow that never came up. But a lot of people have been asking for one. So what I think we're gonna do is I have a lot of friends that have podcasts and stuff like that. So I think that at some point or another, we're going to do a podcast. We're going to get different people that worked on the movie together and do like an hour and a half long podcast that people can just queue up with their Blu-ray. They can like put on their earbuds or whatever they want to do. So there will be a podcast and it'll be free. So anybody that bought it on digital or Blu-ray or whatever will be able to listen to it. So that's coming down the pipeline when we can get around to it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just as an aside, if there's anything like upcoming you want to promote, like next year, your new project, I was gonna say shameless plug, but I have a podcast on GVN, and
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
it's kind of fun. I'll send you an example, but like I get some filmmaker or some kind of creative person, and we talk about a movie or a movie series that they're interested or we're both interested in, like fun bad movies, but then we also it's kind of like a casual interview as well, sort of folded in. So it's
Cool.
yeah.
Cool. When am I gonna be invited?
As soon as you can, I would love that.
Yeah, I've just been getting into doing podcasts on a more regular basis. I took a break for a while, but it's pretty fun, man. I did one with Scott Weinberg a couple weeks ago, and my friend Randy Ostro. That was just insane. It was so fun. So yeah, I'm kind of hooked on it now. So hit me up at some point.
Thank you so much for making time today. Again, the movie's fantastic, and all right.
Yeah, man, it was good talking to you. Thanks for thinking of me.
Bye.
See you later.